What's up guys, welcome back to Tactics Hammer. Today we are looking at the Tyranids detachments in depth. I thought it would be super useful to have a tier list for each one and also a 2,000 point army list of my own making to go with it. Choices in the same tier are not in any particular order, and in the interest of time I've already made the tier list and will just be going over each selection and how it interacts with the detachment. Each point will be extremely brief, as this video could have easily been over 2 hours long, and I want to keep it more based on content and not my justification of decisions. This stuff is still very fresh, so with any tier list this isn't a bible, just a guideline. Still, I encourage your opinions in the comments. We can't be a hive mind without shared knowledge. And without further ado, my 10th edition Tyranids detachment tier list. That was a fucking mouthful. Alright, starting in S tier for the Assimilator Swarm, we have the Haruspecs, already a very strong model, gaining the detachment bonuses here, an easy call to move that up to S. The Biovore is going to be an S for everything, as will the Death Leaper. The Rippers are moving up and down between A and S, but, you know, they're an auto-include anyways, so... The Tyrant Guard are actually very strong in the Assimilator Swarm list. They do have the regenerative ability from the Harvester units, and then the Hive Tyrant will take the enhancement, which can give the whole squad +1 to the attacks and +1 to strength. The Gargoyles are great at point scoring in any list, so an auto-include in this one as well. The Maleceptor, very strong overall in any list, but this one kind of lacking some of the punch with just the Harvester units, so a nice include there. The Neurolictor, great in any list as well, 65 points to give those battle shocks out. Pyrovore, actually going to move up in some strength here, as these are very important for the second tier killing Harvester units. Next, the Barbgons, these are very strong in any list, good for slowing things down and helping you to play a slower game, which is what you're going to hope to do in these Harvester lists. The Psychophage is getting the Harvester keyword, but not necessarily gaining huge benefits from it. The Exocrine, strong in any list, great shooting, great survivability, nice wounds, good to restore stuff on, and kind of leans into this list, leaning back and sitting in your base a little bit. The Lictor, just a nice strong unit in general, maybe not as useful as the Death Leaper or the Neurolictor, but if you want something with a little bit more kill potential to drop in the back lines. Neurotyrants is the list that will probably benefit from the battle shocks there, with a lot of the core abilities relying on you being able to control these objectives. The Raveners, they're moving up and down between B and C. They're basically a take between the second squad of Gargoyles, or if you would like to stick a Ravener squad down in the back, you can pull them up and have them in deep strike for post turn 3. The Zoanthropes, very strong in any detachment, even with the points hike, but they're going to be a little bit nicer in this one, as the Harvester units can restore a full model to them. Venomthropes, same with any list, as long as you are running a decent number of infantry units, it's going to be basically an auto-include for 170 point squad. The Barbed and Scythe Tyro duel, probably best at the high C tier. It is a bit cheeky that you can restore D3 wounds to them, but they are a high wound model that is kind of easy to peel through, so the goal would be to increase their lethality or their ability to get into combat, not restore D3 wounds per turn. The Winged Prime, really not gaining any benefits from this detachment. He's a bit nicer with the point reduction that he received at 65 points, and maybe a nice include if you want to get an extra enhancement out there that you don't have. The Warriors, these are not terrible that they can have a full model restored there, as they're an infantry unit, but they don't really have any benefits other than that in this detachment. The Winged Hive Tyrant is a bit difficult to run in this list. He is a bit similar to the Foot Tyrant in that he can give the free stratagems, which are useful in this detachment, but he does not have anything as far as enhancements go to keep him alive. The Carnifexes and Old One Eye, really nothing gained from the detachment, and they are leaning into a style that is pushing forward, and the Harvester units need you to be within 6 inches of them to restore those wounds, so they'll probably get nothing from it. The Gaunts, Hormagaunts, Termagaunts, and Neurogaunts might be a bit cheeky if you ran just a full swarm list and tried to just keep points to restore them all the time, but I think really going to be difficult in that regard, and probably your best chance there is just to maybe take one for a little bit of double OC, run down the middle and capture an objective. The Von Ryan's Leapers, they are also not benefiting a lot from this detachment. If they're what you want to run as far as your infiltrators go, that's fine. I do think that the Lictor options are a bit better, and their home is probably best in the Vanguard. The Norn models, I actually wish I put the Emissary a bit higher. They don't gain a lot of benefits from this, but they do lean into the style of the Harvester play, which is to sort of sit down around the objectives. They'll have the 5-up Feel No Pain, very defensible, and if they do take some wounds, they will immediately have them restored. So it would actually be kind of nice to have 3 Emissaries all taking their points with some Harvester units around them to restore any wounds that they lose. The Malik and the Trigon, really nothing gained from this detachment here. They are popping up out of Deep Strike, therefore probably too far away from the objectives to gain the Harvester bonuses, and they are not Harvester units themselves. The Tyrannifex, just really high price now, and I can't really see any room for him in any list with the double nerf that he got. D tier here, these are basically just bad units in general that also don't benefit from the Harvester units. D tier here, these are just units that are generally bad and aren't gaining a lot of benefits from the Harvester here either. The Harridan is just too many points for his damage output if you don't have a list that really leans into that. The Tervagon does not restore enough units even in a Swarm list to be considered. The Swarm Lord is way too overpriced for that free CP in the Vex. The Hive Guard got nerfed in their points even though they were already terrible. Toxicrene didn't get his points touched even though he was already terrible. The Broodlord and Gene Stealers got an enormous nerf and really don't lean into this detachment at all. They're up in the front and they end up getting picked off before any of their models are restored, and they are not endless multitude, so it's just one infantry model that can be restored, so very, very bad. Harpy and Hive Crone, they also both very weak and gain nothing from this detachment. Overpriced Hierophant, 800 points, probably impossible to really field it in anything like this. And Parasite Mortrex and Screamer Killer, also models that are very lacking in general and gain nothing from the detachment. Alright, first we're looking at the Assimilation Swarm list. This one's a bit difficult to build. I went a bit cheeky here. The Death Leaper as in all the list, then the Hive Tyrant with the Parasitic Biomorphology, which is going to give him and the Tyrant Guard +1 attacks after they get a kill. Gargoyles like in all lists for scoring points. Wish I could get 2 squads of those, but this one was a bit tough trying to fit in all the Harvester units. So I put the Biovores here for 75 points. Auto-include a Neurolictor, pretty much an auto-include in every list. Pyrovores, 3 squads of 3 here. These are great for fully killing out a squad. They have very low movement, so that's going to be their biggest issue there, is trying to get up the field. They're pretty durable guys for 30 points each. The Tyrant Guard goes with the Hive Tyrant. Not super relevant even with the +1 attacks, but it will be nice to see a squad of 6 of them actually able to do some damage with the extra attack and strength there. Zoanthrope, squad of 6 to secure kills on something larger, which this squad and army will generally lack, having none of the big guns and nothing that leans into those big guns in the Harvester units. So a squad of 6 Zoanthropes is nice. They can restore a whole model. And then the Ripper Swarms, I went with 2 squads of 3. I had extra points, so I tacked 2 more onto one. I originally had a 60-point 3-man squad and then 2 20 points for the regular scoring. The Exocrine is in here just because it's a generally good model. Nice to trigger those reroll ones for the Zoanthropes. High wounds and can hold something in the back. Harospexes, 2 of those, 3 of those, obviously a great model for its wounds and damage output. Probably pound for pound the top model in the codex, and gaining the Harvester unit. Doesn't have a invuln save, so very, very susceptible to getting pulled off the board by high AP shots. And then the Psychophage, this is a Harvester unit, but it is very easy to pull off the board, so just one to hide it, probably put it on an objective and give out the Feel No Pain if I can keep it out of sight. General goals of this list, it's going to feel very much like Tyranids have in 10th edition, not able to necessarily pull a lot of things off the board, but you've got to lean into your ability to take objectives, score secondaries, and sort of put your opponent in a bad position while you play a bit safer. If you want to sort of score your points with your Gargoyles, your Biovores, your Death Leaper, and Neurolictors, just try to position your Harvester units in a nice spot to restore things when they're attacked and to sort of prepare for the later points in the game when you can start to really open up and attack more. The Crusher Stampede, the Death Leaper, and the Biovore auto-includes in the S tier. The Maliceptor and the Exocrine, both very, very strong models already and benefit from the Crusher Stampede detachment. The Neurolictor, already going to be strong in any list, receiving a little bit of benefit from all the big bugs that are going to be creating some space for it, that it can sort of sit in back and hide behind and create those battle shocks on anything that takes a point. The Carnifex and Old One Eye, these guys are definitely benefiting big time from the Crusher Stampede. I didn't include them in my list because I don't have a ton of experience running them over the Hairospecs and some of these other bigger bugs that just have similar offensive profiles. The Hierodules, both of them very high wound models, so very, very difficult to take off in one turn. Easy to get them into combat if you happen to deep strike them in rapid ingress. The Hairospecs, again, are a super strong unit, probably belongs maybe top of A tier. A very, very rounded offensive and defensive profile for very low point cost and gaining the benefit of the detachment. The Trigon and Malik, also both monsters, gaining that benefit, and then they are both very strong to begin with. The Gargoyles, of course, great point scores and a top tier unit in any list. The Foot Tyrant, very usable in this list. It has a lot of stratagems that are battle tactic, and he will, of course, himself be a monster and make his unit a monster, and they can be very strong if they take the enhancement for rerolls versus one monster vehicle on the enemy team, especially if they have something really big like a knight. Ripper Swarm's easy point scores in any list. Tyrannifex, one of the few lists that's going to benefit him. He has very high toughness. He can use one turn to remove his damage completely, and that will allow you to maybe take a few damage, get peppered up, and gain those benefits from the detachment, and then reduce all the damage from something big that might be able to blow him away otherwise. The 2 Norn models, these are going to both be monsters, so they'll take the benefit there, but they do not need the bonus to hit in melee, so that's not going to help them at all, and then the bonus to wound is going to be very difficult to achieve, not necessarily the biggest benefit there. Zoanthropes, good in any squad, nice to add in here as something to really give some punch power to take something out that's a bit too beefy for just the Exocrine to take out by itself. The Neurotyrant, nice in any list to give that subtraction of the Battle Shock test. The Psychophage, he actually doesn't gain anything from the Crusher Stampede as he has the Battle Sisters army rule already built into him, but he does gain the benefit of giving all these big bugs the 6-up Feel No Pain, and that's very, very strong in an army that is trying to keep them alive rather than getting them fully pulled off in one turn. The Pyrovore, good in any list, just nice situationally to pull some cover off or to burn some smaller infantry units coming off of reserves. Raveners, equivalent to what would be a second squad of gargoyles, but you can keep them in deep strike longer than third turn. The Screamer Killer, actually one of the few lists that works well with him. I wouldn't say it works great with him, but I wanted to put him up somewhere, and being that this Crusher Stampede doesn't have any other benefits to something that is non-monster, I at least put him in the B tier above all of these other infantry unit choices. The Swarm Lord, I guess he can be here. We like the CP generation, we like that he gets the benefit from the detachment, but do not like that he is 270 points and way overpriced. The Winged Hive Tyrant, going to be very difficult to keep alive in this one, no enhancements that you can drop on him for survivability, and the detachment doesn't do anything for him as far as survivability either. Barbgaunts, always decently strong, nice for slowing down movement, especially when you're charging up the middle, hoping that you can charge something and it doesn't charge you with the monsters. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an auto-include in this one. The Harpy, Hivecrone, and Harridan, all three flyers, I can do them all at once. They're all going to receive the benefit of the detachment, but it is not that big of a benefit for them, and they are not that strong to begin with, so I wouldn't say it leans into their strengths necessarily too much. The Gaunts are all going to be not benefiting from this at all. You might want to include one squad just for the sake of capturing a point with that 2 OC, but other than that, no real point for them. Lictor, he's decent in this one. I think having some lone operatives in there with these big bugs is going to be nice. I'd probably just go with some Neurolictors over him. Warriors, no benefit here from the detachment. Them and the Winged Prime are sort of just out in left field here. The Gene Stealers and Broodlord, they are viable, but really no point in this specific detachment. And then the Hive Guard, Biohierophant, Parasitomortrex, Tervigon, Toxicrine, all very, very bad in general, so even if the detachment benefits a couple of those that are monsters, they sit down in D tier because they're just not usable. The Venomthropes, just no purpose in a list that has no infantry in it and no benefits to the infantry since their stealth ability is only given to infantry, and monsters don't really need the cover that they give. It's very easy to gain cover in 10th edition. Von Ryan's Leapers, again, just not very good infantry unit in this detachment. Crusher Stampede here with the big bugs. Of course, we're going to have the Death Leaper just because it's great at scoring points. The Hive Tyrant will have Monstrous Nemesis and some Tyrant Guard. There are no enhancements to protect the Hive Tyrant, so you got to give him the guard in that scenario. And the Monstrous Nemesis is going to be nice to pick out a monster or vehicle that this Hive Tyrant and Tyrant Guard squad are going to absolutely destroy when they get into combat with it. The Gargoyles here for scoring points, Biovore for the same, Neurolictor almost an auto-include in every list, Pyrovore, I think I had 30 points extra, and this is a nice unit to throw in if you have the 2 Rippers already and you have 30 points. Ripper Swarms, I had 3 of them here. I had 20 extra points at the end. The Exocrines, 3 of them. They're just super strong. They're great for basically anything in the game. Good shooting. They'll benefit from the monster rules and high wounds, high kill potential. And I just think the biggest problem with this list is going to be, even though you have the ability to move through other monsters with that CP, 1, that's going to be a big waste of your CP trying to burn through that every time, and 2, too many of the monsters are going to be stuck in like a lunch line waiting to get their turn to attack when you actually get down to melee, because even though you can move through things, you're not going to have room to get into engagement range with all these things. So I think it'll be nice to have some mid-range stuff with the Maliceptors, some long-range stuff with the Exocrines, and then the Heraspexes and the Maliceptors, Malik, Psychophage sort of all slowly moving towards the front line and hopefully gaining some wounds there. The Psychophage's goal is more or less to give that Feel No Pain out and hopefully keep a model from dying completely. Probably going to be hiding it a lot since the Psychophage itself doesn't benefit from the gaining of the Battle Sisters rule. It already had one built into himself. The Malik here, he's just a nice monster. I wanted something that dropped in off a deep strike. I didn't want to overload the melee, but this would be nice to come in from sort of behind there, and you'll see that pretty much anything that you're shooting at on the list that isn't point scoring, Gargoyles, Biovores, Neurolictors, and Pyrovores, the Hive Tyrant and the Tyrant Guard, 8 toughness, the Exocrine, The Haruspecs, the Maliceptor, the Malik, and the Psychophage all T10, I think. Maybe the Psychophage is 9. T10 or above. The Invasion Fleet, Death Leaper Biovore auto-include S tier. The Exocrine, already a very strong unit moving between A and S, but going to receive the benefit of possibly those lethal hits or sustained hits and really push him over the edge into S tier. Gargoyles, always an auto-include for shoot and scoot and scoring those points. Neurolictor, very good for causing the Battle Shock test and just very good to include in any balanced list like this. Haruspecs, also a nice include on a balanced list like this, though there isn't a lot to keep him alive other than the 5-up Feel No Pain that you could potentially put on him. The Maliceptor, very, very strong in any situation. Tiny points hike, still has an awesome aura and fits very nicely in this list with the lethals. The Zoanthropes, very, very strong in any list. They are not gaining the lethal hits that the rest of the army might gain, but if you do have a squad of 6 of them, you can in the command phase give them the sustained hits versus infantry models, and that can be absolutely bananas in their blast profiles. The Foot Tyrant, lots of battle tactic stratagems here that can be used still, so he is still very, very high tier. The Ripper Swarms, great for scoring points. Venomthropes, very, very strong in this list. There's lots of good infantry options in here, and they will provide the stealth to all of them. The Gaunts, there's obviously some great swarm options in this list. I think they've been limited by how much the nerfs have affected the Hive Tyrant with the battle tactic stratagem, especially that one of those is no longer able to be cast twice per turn for restoring the models. So a big, big hit to the swarm list. I think it's still a strong list in the Invasion Fleet. That said, I think it might be stronger under Unending Swarm. The Scythe and Barbed Hyrule went a little bit of a point hike there, but they are still very strong in this list, gaining the lethal hits, which will make them unbelievably powerful if you can land some of those. Barb Gaunt's nice shooting profile, great for slowing an infantry squad down, and nice to have in a well-balanced list like the Invasion Fleet. Old One Eye and the Carnifex is very, very strong. I haven't run them a ton of times, but they feel nice coming in off reserves. They take shots. They're going to move forward and get into combat very, very quickly. The Maulock and Trigon, pretty similar as far as their situations. One is going to be better for taking out the big things, the Trigon, and have the 3-inch deep strike. The Maulock is going to be a bit more situational with dealing out the mortal wounds. I think that their balance as far as their defensive profile and both coming out of deep strike, they're pretty similar, and it's just going to be situational as which one's going to serve you better. The Neuro Tyrant, just a good overall unit to provide that -1 to battle shock and can be very helpful in a list that now has the access to these Neurolictors, which are providing a negative aura to things with the battle shock. The Pyrovore, always a nice 30-point add-in on an army. They can come in off reserves and pull the cover off a unit that you're trying to kill, or possibly use their Twin Link to score a secondary with killing a squad off. The Raveners are going to be hit or miss on which one you're using between them or a second squad of Gargoyles. They're nice to pull out into Deep Strike in turns 4 and 5. The Norn models, they are pretty good for holding a points. The Norn models, both of these, not super great offensive output. They are nice, very defensible units that can hold a point and are very difficult to chew through. I'd say maybe the Emissary probably works a bit better in this list to have the 4-up invuln save, but providing those possible lethal hits or sustained hits to them, very, very key and increasing their... The Warriors, they struggle to find a real balance in where they fit in the list. The swarm lists or some of the gaunts would serve better for taking objectives for cheaper, and they have better OC, take up less space. They have some cuteness that you can add one of each gun into a squad of 3. Their damage is so swingy and unreliable. I just don't love them, so I'm going to leave them in C tier with the Winged Prime, who is oftentimes one of their buddies, who's probably the only squad really worth joining. Sometimes you put him in a Gargoyle squad for the shoot and scoot. Tyrannifex, he is just too expensive now with the double nerf that he received on points and on the way that his defensive profile works. The Broodlord and the Gene Stealers have some nice benefits that they gain from the detachment, but they're still probably best seen in the Vanguard list. There's just other things that do melee better than them before their nerf, and now that they have been nerfed with their Devastating Wounds rerolls, it's probably just going to be better to just run something like the Scythe Hyrule or one of the big bugs in melee. The Harridan is going to gain the either lethal hits or sustained hits, so a big gain for his already enormous shooting profile, and then you can put the 5-up Feel No Pain on him with the stratagem, so probably a bit sneaky there. You probably get a nice damage output out of the Harridan in exchange for his 30 wounds, but 610 points, tough to run. The Lictor, he's strong. I prefer the Death Leaper, then Neurolictor, then a second Neurolictor, and then if you're trying to run a 4th Lone Operative, then maybe a Lictor. It's just having the Battle Shocks is so useful, and you still get to keep the invuln save. The Screamer Killer, still struggling in any list that isn't leaning into the Battle Shocks, and struggling in any list in general, just because his offensive profile is pretty poop for 170 points. The Tyrant Guard are sitting down here in C tier. They're not bad if you want to stick them on the Hive Tyrant. He does have the enhancement that you can give him for the Feel No Pain, so I think most people have just been running him with the Adaptive Biology and sort of hiding him a bit more rather than putting the guard on and trying to run him forward. The Von Ryan's Leapers are an alternative choice for infiltrators if that's what you have. They are suffering from what many of the Leviathan things are suffering from. Very, very weak right now, and there are just better options other than them. The Winged Hive Tyrant, he's not bad in this list. He has the 5-up Feel No Pain that you can give him with Adaptive Biology, so probably put him a little bit higher than this. Still, it's such a struggle to keep him alive in any list that isn't Vanguard that you can give him the Lone Operative in. The D tier, Harpy and Hivecrone, just overpriced flyers for their output right now. The Swarmlord sees another hike in his price at 270 points now, just not worth it for that CP generation unless you really need it. The Hive Guard, already overpriced and now priced even higher. Really nothing to benefit these guys in this list that wouldn't benefit something else much, much better. The Tervigon, he is just way overpriced in a list like this when the stratagems can restore models better than he can. Parasite and Mortrex, overall just kind of a weak model, very, very underwhelming offensive profile, hardly ever gets those rippers off, maybe just one set of squad before they pull him off the board, and it's cute but just not worth it. Psychophage, he has a decent profile. They gave him a bit of nerf to the anti-psyker. He's just only going to be included in the list where you really need that 6-up Feel No Pain to prevent squads from being fully killed off. Biohierophant, overpriced 800 points. Toxicrene, way overpriced 170 points. Looking at the Invasion fleet here, the most balanced list available and probably just feels the most comfortable for us to make just because it's been the one that's been available since the beginning, the Death Leaper as in every list. Then the Hive Tyrant is going to have the Adaptive Biology, arguably the best enhancement that you can put on the Hive Tyrant in any of the detachments, giving him that 5-up Feel No Pain, which moves up to a 4-up Feel No Pain on any turn that you begin with less than your maximum wounds. 10 gargoyles up to 20 now after playing this list for a while, and I think that'll sort of be how these other detachments go as you start to work out the things that are very, very useful for the detachment, and you can find ways to pull out some extra points and find room to add in things that are just great for scoring, and that's what gargoyles are. Barb Gaunts, I had some extra points here. It is nice to get them in some of the lists. They do have the nice reduction to movement, and then a D6 blast profile for so few points is just generally strong. Pyrovore here, 30 points, had extra, great for pulling off the cover or just destroying a weak infantry unit coming in off reserves. Venomthropes feel very strong in this list. They're going to give the stealth ability to a ton of things around them. Zoanthropes, these are going to be bread and butter for pulling off the high toughness units. Pound for pound, these guys, even though they've taken a big point hike, are just the strongest and easiest way for us to send some las cannon equivalent shots into our high toughness enemies and hopefully pull them off the board. 2 of the Ripper Swarms, great for the point scoring now that the Biovores can only put out 1 spore per turn, so these are going to sort of do the role of being your later round spores. The Exocrines, Haruspecs, both very just quality units, high wounds, high toughness, and nice damage output for the point cost. The Exocrines are going to trigger the reroll ones, and then the Haruspecs is going to be charging down the middle, looking to get into melee combat, or you can bring him off reserves, feels very nice with that. The Maliceptor, almost an auto include in many of these lists just because of how strong his defensive profile is with the invulnerable save. 11 toughness is a nice key point to hit there, and I think that'll sort of be how these other detachments go as you start to work out the things that are very, very useful for the detachment, and you can find ways to pull out some extra points and find room to add in things that are just great for scoring, and that's what gargoyles are. Barb Gaunts, I had some extra points here. It is nice to get them in some of the lists. They do have the nice reduction to movement, and then a D6 blast profile for so few points is just generally strong. Pyrovore here, 30 points, had extra, great for pulling off the cover or just destroying a weak infantry unit coming in off reserves. Venomthropes feel very strong in this list. They're going to give the stealth ability to a ton of things around them. Zoanthropes, these are going to be bread and butter for pulling off the high toughness units. Pound for pound, these guys, even though they've taken a big point hike, are just the strongest and easiest way for us to send some las cannon equivalent shots into our high toughness enemies and hopefully pull them off the board. 2 of the Ripper Swarms, great for the point scoring now that the Biovores can only put out 1 spore per turn, so these are going to sort of do the role of being your later round spores. The Exocrines, Hero specs, both very just quality units, high wounds, high toughness, and nice damage output for the point cost. The Exocrines are going to trigger the reroll ones, and then the Hero specs is going to be charging down the middle, looking to get into melee combat, or you can bring him off reserves, feels very nice with that. The Maliceptor, almost an auto include in many of these lists just because of how strong his defensive profile is with the invulnerable save. 11 toughness is a nice key point to hit there. For the Unending Swarm, Bioborn Death Leaper, always an S tier. The Gargoyles actually gaining a benefit from a detachment and were already so strong to begin with. The ability to bring them back brings them up to an S tier unit. A tier, we have the Gaunts, of course. They are so strong and absolutely necessary in bulk in this squad. Probably would be justified just fine in S tier just because they're an auto include. The Neurolictor, already very strong, can sit behind the Gaunts and create these battle shocks. Psychophage finds perhaps his best home hiding in the back and just providing the aura for all these Gaunts, which will absolutely love having the auras and coming back and using them again and again. Only fear is he might be targeted by some indirect fire. The Swarm Lord, a very, very strong unit here. The viability of the Winged Hive Tyrant, the Foot Tyrant, very limited as to the battle tactic stratagems, and they cannot use the 2 CP to bring back a full unit since it is destroyed, so you will need that flat CP generated from the Swarm Lord. Venomthropes, of course, in a list where you have tons of infantry units, they're going to be amazing to give them that stealth. Neurotyrant, very good to create the battle shocks in a list that is going to struggle to create battle shocks on its own without being able to kill units. Zoanthropes, giving some punch power in an army that has none, and giving out the invuln save to hundreds of units that have almost no save to begin with. The Winged Prime, pretty cheap and lots of utility for the Gargoyles in this list, can gain the benefit of moving when being shot at and move into engagement range, so that's going to bring them up to at least B tier. Maliceptor, strong in any list, nice to give out that auras. It is tough to give out a big bug for them to shoot at, but if you bring them in off reserves, can be a nice one to slow down some of the shooting that they have. Exocrine, very strong in any list, though might not have a great home here, as you are giving them something to shoot at with their big guns, though he is always strong to keep in the back and land on a single point. Foot Tyrant, still pretty strong if you already have the Swarm Lord in the list, nice to add. He has a couple battle tactic stratagems that can keep those swarms alive. Neurogants, not as good as the other Gaunts because they don't have the 2 OC and they aren't as durable, but still pretty strong in this for creating Synapse very cheaply, and they can be returned if you so wanted to. Pyrovore, good in any list, 30 points, pulling off the cover, and adds a little bit of damage to a list that lacks it. Barb Gaunts, not bad in this one for slowing down some infantry you might come across. Turvagon finding its only home here, despite the fact that it interacts perfectly with this list, it is just way overpriced and probably still not going to be seen in most of these. C tier and below, just everything that's going to be infantry and monsters that aren't Unending Swarm and things that cannot interact with them. The Barbed and Scythyro duels, the Hero specs, the Carnifex, and Old One Eye, all very strong units to begin with, but don't really have anything that they gain from the detachment. The Norm models, not bad off reserves, but becoming the only big bug that they can shoot at and not really benefiting from the detachment. Raveners, still decent, but really bypass their only utility in this list with the ability to bring the units back and deploy them from reserves after turn 3. Tyrant Guard, not bad if you want to put some survivability on your Swarm Lord. Probably going to have to put 6 of these if you want to move him up because the only big guns in the game are all going to be aiming at him. The Von Ryan's Leapers and Lictor, other infiltrator units, still strong in this list, but I wouldn't understand why you would run these unless you already had 3 Neurolictors and 1 Death Leaper, and at that point there is no need for any more infiltrators. D tier is going to be gaining nothing from the detachment. A lot of these overpriced to begin with. The Toxicrine, Screamer Killer, Parasite of Mortrex, Biohierophant, the Harpy, Hivecrone, Harridan, Hiveguard, Tyrannifex, all just very overpriced to begin with. And then the Warriors and Gene Stealers and Broodlord leading them, just providing infantry models that are juicier and cannot utilize the detachment, so really a waste. The Winged Hive Tyrant, not a terrible model, but no enhancements on this list. The Winged Hive Tyrant, a strong model, but no enhancements on the list to keep him alive, and no excuse for them to shoot anything but him with their big guns when he pops up on the board. The Carnifex, supposed to be up near Old One Eye, and the Malik and Trigon have decent profiles, but have nothing to keep them alive in the detachment, so the second they come off of Deep Strike, they're going to be pulled off the board. The Unending Swarm, straightforward. It is a swarm list. The Death Leaper will be an auto-include in all lists. The Swarm Lord finds his only home in this list, and probably the only detachment that could ever give him a quality home. It is nice to have the Vex and the extra CP, but with the nerf to how Vex works and how expensive he is now at 270 points. He was already a bit overpriced for his melee profile. 270 just for that CP generation. There are a lot of armies that can generate CP for so much cheaper than that. And not to mention, he sort of makes the Death Leaper Neurolictor ability non-existent until he dies, because you can't gain more than 1 CP in a turn. That said, this list needs the extra CP. It needs it. A very stratagem-intensive list. This is going to require that you bring back these models as they are destroyed at least once per turn when you have the 2 CP available to bring a whole squad back, where you string out the Gaunts and your Endless Multitude units, and then you leave the Auras and the Hive Tyrants, previously the free stratagems, sitting in base, where your gaunts are strung out to the end, and they sort of run out and capture points, and as they die, these auras and the stratagems are used to keep them alive. In this list, the stratagems are used to keep them alive to some extent. You don't want to waste too much. You need to have at least 2 CP available per turn, and you can do it once per phase. So in the shooting phase and in the fight phase, you can bring a squad back. So basically your whole goal with this list would be to take all these battle line units and give them the auras from the Venomthropes, the Zoanthropes, and the Psychophage. And that's just going to make them much more difficult to kill, and more importantly, more difficult to analyze exactly how many shots are needed for each squad to fully wipe them off the board. The Gargoyles for point scoring, and this squad of 20, just to bring back a full squad of 20, very, very strong. Another squad of 10 Gargoyles for the shoot and scoot. The Hormagaunts here are going to be 130 points, 10 more than the Termagants. They are good to have at least 2 squads there, very nice in melee, stronger than the Termagants are if you can get them into melee, but they do lack because you can't just overwhelm and get everything in melee, not enough space, and it's just nice to have the Termagants shooting to guarantee being able to get some shots in, and with the new Strangle Webs, you will have some devastating wounds available, or mortal wounds, one of the two. The Termagants, 4 squads of them. They have the Strangle Web, which is the new weapon with the devastating wounds. There are 2 other new weapons that can be added, basically having 2 Strangle Webs, 2 of one, 2 of another, and then what does that leave? 14 of the remaining guns, but you are running a swarm list. That's unacceptable to be trying to swap out all those different shots and try to still make it game in time. So I just went with, obviously, 18 Termagants and then the Strangle Webs for the devastating wounds. The Biovores for point scoring, Neurolictor, just great in any list. I wanted to include 2 of these. I didn't quite have the points. This list sort of struggles to get battle shocks off. You're not going to be reducing your units to lower numbers. Your Death Leaper isn't necessarily as easy to keep alive. Pyrovore, extra 30 points coming in off the edge there. Nice to pull off the cover. Might be decent for securing a kill on perhaps a secondary when you draw, needing assassination, or hopefully just to kill a squad off of a point. Zoanthropes, having 2 squads of 3 of them. I was thinking about, this would be interesting with the Venomthropes and the Zoanthropes. The squads are going to be moving out, and obviously we're going to be trailing them back so that the auras can be received through the Psychophage. But I just thought it would be difficult to keep the Zoanthropes alive and out of sight in the back, and I was worried about losing 1 squad of the Venomthropes, especially when the gaunts sort of start to disperse out a bit more and you can't necessarily keep a string back. It would be much easier to travel with the Venomthropes. But what I was thinking is maybe dropping the Venomthrope squad, but the Zoanthropes have a different utility with them. They do give the 6-up invulnerable save, which is incredible for units that already have such a terrible save to begin with. In addition, they are providing possibly your only ability to kill something larger on like a bring it down draw, and you can sort of take the Gaunt's devastating wounds that you have dished out to maybe a bigger model that you've just thrown attacks at because it was the only one available, has 8 or 9 wounds left, hopefully drop off like 5 or 6 of those, and then finish it off with the Gaunts, and that will allow you to score those points and still have the invuln save. So I think 2 squads of Zoanthropes, Ripper Swarms for scoring the points, and then Psychophage in the back right next to the poor Swarm Lord. Both of these guys relegated to never leaving the base so that they don't get shot off the board. And the biggest thing with this squad is you do not have any big bugs, nothing with greater than 5 toughness even on the board. So all of these big shots feel very wasted in here, and which is good. That's what you're hoping for. That's what you're leaning into with a swarm list, is giving them lots of things to attack inefficiently. The Synaptic Nexus detachment, the Biovore and Death Leaper are going to be auto-includes in every list in S tier, and then the Neurolictor and the Neurotyrants are just absolutely devastating in this list for their ability to cause those battle shocks, which you can respond with these mortal wounds on. The Foot Tyrant's going to provide those very useful battle tactic stratagems for free, of which there are 3 of them. He also comes with Synapse, which is very important in this list, and in general just very strong and synergistic with the Synaptic Nexus detachment. The Exocrine, the ability to give him the 5-up invuln save and improve his damage output, is going to make him very strong in this list. Gargoyles, great for the shoot and scoot point scoring. The Harridan, all the way up in A tier. Someone's going to be real mad at me for this, but man, you play him one time and see how much damage he can actually drop in a single turn very reliably, and still very difficult to kill him when you put the 5-up invuln save on him every turn. He is a beast. The Zoanthropes and Malicept are both very, very synergistic with this detachment, so they're going to benefit from pretty much everything that isn't the 5-up invuln save. The Norn models, the Emissary is actually going to be beneath the Assimilator here. I don't know if that's necessarily the right call. I'm just thinking that the Assimilator definitely is benefiting more from this detachment, coming in off reserves just specifically when he's shooting his gun, you assume something, you'll be placing it when you come off reserves, you have to be 9 inches away. The target you're going to be attacking, 9 inches out, you shoot with his gun, which will reduce the charge by 2 inches. You now have a 7-inch charge. On that same turn, you'll use the imperative to give +1 to the charge roll, and that will make his charge on very first turn coming off reserves only needing a 6, and that's going to make it a very, very easy charge to land with a reroll possible, and you can basically guarantee him getting into melee right away, and then hopefully after killing something very big with him, you can scoot him over to an objective where you'll have that 5-up feel no pain. The Ripper Swarms, great for point scoring. Barb Gaunts, great for slowing things down, which will be important in this when you have a big shooting list, trying to keep things from getting into range of you. They will also benefit from the rerolls of the stratagems. The Scythe and Barbed Hyro duels will benefit from the stratagems a bit there, but they are a bit oversized, and that will make it a bit difficult to fit into range for the melee, so probably only going to be able to run like one big model in this list to get into melee, and then everything else is going to be benefiting more from the ranged rerolls. The Carnifex's Old One-Eye Haruspecs, Malek, and Trigun are going to have huge benefits from every single Synaptic imperative that the detachment provides, and in addition, the stratagems that they have will give them the rerolls to 1s. It's basically going to be trying to choose which models you want to use because you're not going to have enough room for a full army of melee with this detachment. Neurogants, a very cheap way to provide synapse in the army, so they're actually going to be pretty useful in here for 45 points. Make sure that you can always provide those mortal wounds if anything fails those battle shock tests. Lictor, basically just choosing which lone operative units you want to use. The Neuro Lictor is going to be absolute auto include, but you might want to include some Lictors as well. Just very nice to have those lone op units in the Synaptic detachment. The Winged Hive Tyrant is going to struggle to keep alive in this one with just the -1 to damage enhancement, but he is benefiting from being a Synapse creature that can drop in the back and get some of those Synaptic imperative bonuses. The Pyrovore is great for pulling off the cover and good if you have an extra 30 points in any army. The Termagants can benefit from a lot of these imperatives and the rerolls, and of course they have the 2 OC, so they're nice to have out there. Warriors, pretty nice to gain the benefits from the shooting in this list, though I think there's just probably some things that are going to be gaining it a little bit more with just more power from the Zoanthropes or Maliceptor. Venomthropes, always nice if you're running a decent number of infantry in there, 70 points to give them a stealth. The Gene Stealers and Broodlord, they have a few the Gene Stealers and Broodlords benefit from a few of the Synaptic imperatives, but the rest of the detachment doesn't really help them as much as they already have the rerolls to 1s on wounds and hits. The Harpy, Hivecrone, and Biohierophant, all pretty overpriced model for their damage output. They will benefit from the stratagem for the rerolls, but I think there's just other things that are going to be doing that better than them. The Gaunts, probably going to want to stick with the Termagants in this list. They're just going to benefit from the detachment a bit more than the Hormagaunts. The Raveners, they're not benefiting a ton from this detachment either, but they are nice to take in place of a second squad of Gargoyles for a turn 4 or 5 deep strike. D-tier Tyrannifex, D-tier the Tyrannifex, D-tier Tyrannifex, Tervigon, Hiveguard, Parasite of Mortrex, Swarmlord, and Toxicrene are all going to be very overpriced and just generally not a good profile in exchange for what they have. The Psychophage offers maybe a bit more as far as his offensive and defensive profile, but just nothing to benefit in this attachment for him. Alright, the Synaptic Nexus list. This is probably the one I've had the most fun with and have been building and changing the most. Starting with the Death Leaper, an auto include in every list for me. The Hive Tyrant coming with the Synaptic Control, I think is the one that gives the -1 to damage, which is important to have on your Tyrant. If you want to have him out there without Tyrant Guard, you need a detachment. This one is a little bit iffy with only the -1 to damage. You're still going to have to be very touch and go with your Hive Tyrant, or you'll lose him early. The Neuro Tyrant, an absolute auto include if you can. This one is, of course, leaning into the Battle Shocks, which is very important for this entire list, triggering the mortal wounds, and this guy will give the -1 overall Battle Shock when you do your Shadow in the Warp. The Winged Tyranid Prime comes with a -1 aura, and he will be sitting in one of these Gargoyle squads. You drop this guy off the board, do the shoot and scoot with the Gargoyles, and you can move the Tyranid Prime into range to give this -1 to leadership aura, and then the Neuro Tyrant's going to give an additional -1 to that roll, and you'll have a -2 to a lot of things, whichever you can get into 12-inch range with this Winged Tyranid Prime. So very nice. I wouldn't even say that that's gimmicky so much as just a very easy thing to set up. The Gargoyles, second squad of those, both of these just mostly for point scoring, but obviously one with the Winged Prime for the subtractional leadership. Biovore, point scoring. Neurolictor, auto include 2. Really thought about 3 here. Had 3 in here for a while. Pyrovores, 30 points there. Nice, easy include towards the end of a list, pull off cover, and this is going to be actually really useful in this list. This list is big on, for the damage at least, will be probably one of the only Tyranids lists that feels like it can equate damage to some of these higher quality shooting lists like Eldar. Being able to remove the cover from whatever you're shooting at is going to be very, very pristine for getting quick and efficient kills. Ripper Swarms, there for classic point scoring. Exocrine, obviously just very strong in a shooting army. This guy's going to get the benefit from the 5-up, comes from the army rule, reroll 1s to hit and wounds. He's very nice to just sit in the back and move to a point and shoot anyways, just has a really strong defensive profile, nice range. Maleceptor, this is another one that I wish I could even go to 3 on. The detachment gives them a big boost in offensive power, and pretty much the only thing that isn't synergistic with them in Synaptic Nexus is the 5-up invuln save, since they already have a 4-up. And then a Maluk here, I had some extra points. He seems like a nice fit in here. He can cause, when he drops, a battle shock if he lands a 5-up and 3 mortal wounds. Just a few things that sort of lean into where the Maluk is comfortable, and I think he will be a nice benefit from this one. This list is a bit of a meme, but honestly it's super strong. With the Death Leaper in and auto include the Hive Tyrant, I forgot to put his benefit for the -1 to damage there. That's going to be a necessity to keep him alive. So we'll probably have to drop something like the one of the Ripper Swarms. There we go. Very easy. So drop a Ripper, add that. Battle Line for scoring points, Gargoyles. Biovores for scoring points. Neurolictors just generally very strong in this list. Zoanthropes, a squad of 3 and a squad of 6 for shooting. I had to cap off some of these because we are getting something that is doing basically the equivalent of them for big damage in the Harridan, and it's just such an expensive model that there's points that have to be shaved in lots of places in this army. 3 Ripper Swarms down to 2. I think I have to cut one of those. The Exocrine, just generally strong, great shooting, good defensive profile for 135 points. The reroll 1s can be nice to add to a second model, and also he just benefits nice from the stratagem for the rerolls as well. The Harridan, this is the bread and butter of this list. This guy is an absolute monster. He is going to come in with a shitload, an average of like 19, 10 strength, -3 AP, 3 damage shots. And the biggest thing with this is the stratagem. Obviously, that's where we're getting the unloaded damage from this guy. A huge profile with 3 up to hit, then reroll 1s, and then you're gaining reroll 1s on wound as well from the stratagem. And then on the text in the Harridan reads that if you take 1 to 3 mortal wounds in your phase, you gain an additional 1 to the hit roll or 1 to the wound roll, which is unbelievable. He's going to be basically hitting on 2s and basically wounding on 2s with reroll 1s. This guy pulled off a squad of Wraithguard with the Spirit Seer in one shot. Killed like 15 models equivalent. That's all you're doing. You're taking the Harridan, running down the middle with the rest of your army, and just melting things. This is probably going to be, of any Tyranid list, one of the most deadly that you can find. To have the Maleceptor, Exocrine, Harridan shooting with Zoanthropes. Basically, the only thing that isn't leaning into this is the point scorers, Gargoyles, Death Leaper, Ripper Swarms, Neurolictor, Biovore, and then the Hive Tyrant, who is just giving the free stratagems out. That's what his purpose is there. So there's no reason that you can't absolutely destroy anything that you come into contact with this list, and it's a very fun list to just enjoy the game, maybe in a different way than 10th edition has felt for Tyranids so far. Vanguard Onslaught, we have the Biovore and Death Leaper as auto includes at the top. Neurolictor going to have the Vanguard keyword, so already a very strong model moving up to the S tier. The Winged Hive Tyrant, absolutely monstrous in this detachment, moving all the way up from normally in C and D tier to the S tier. He has the Vanguard, which is going to give him all the benefits of the detachment, and then also the Lone Operative stratagem, which is going to be absolutely huge for keeping him alive. The Gene Stealers and Broodlord all the way up to A tier. I really wish the nerf didn't hit them so hard that they'd be up to S tier in this. They are very, very good to drop full squads of them and almost guarantee getting into melee the very first turn you make movements with them, with the scout movement and your regular movement available to you. The Lictor moving very high up in the list here, gaining the ability to advance and charge and all the other benefits of having the Vanguard keyword, plus also being a pretty strong model to begin with. The Winged Prime, a bit of an overpriced model originally that gave him the points cut, and people were wondering where he fit in. I think this list is exactly where it is. He has the warriors that he can put in his squad, either the melee or the ranged, and they synergize so well together and with this detachment that they take a group of models that are probably low C tier for any army and move them up to pretty good viability. So I think any army with some warriors in these in the Vanguard detachment is going to be feeling pretty good. The Rippers and Gargoyles, of course, for point scoring. The Maleceptor, Haruspex, and Exocrine, none of those are gaining the benefits from the Vanguard detachment, though they are very, very strong models just to begin with. The Foot Tyrant, a strong unit in general, but without gaining the benefits of the Vanguard, you probably just want to run 2 Winged Hive Tyrants instead. The Parasite of Mortrex, a terrible offensive profile, finally finding a home here in the Vanguard Onslaught. Not great, but still something that is maybe viable. The Pyrovore, always a nice include at 30 points off reserves to pull off cover. The Von Ryan's Leapers gain a ton out of this detachment. They were struggling as the only infiltrators without lone operative. Very difficult to put them in a position where they're going to make combat in the first turn and not get shot off the board if you don't get first turn. However, now you can put them a little bit further back and lean on that advance and charge that you're going to have. The Scythe and Barbed Hierodual, not really gaining anything from this detachment. You probably wouldn't want to run them just because you're going to want to lean into the Vanguard stuff, but just big wound, strong models, so I wouldn't put them too far down. Barbgaunt's not bad at all here, though I would say that you are charging forward at them, so maybe a little less utility on reducing their movement speed. There is nowhere to run when they're starting in their deployment zone, and you can basically get a lot of your models into melee in their deployment zone on turn 1. The Old One-Eye and Carnifex, interestingly enough, would probably do pretty well in here just because they lean into the style of play so well that you're shooting at so many big things on the board, they're probably going to make it into melee. That said, they just don't have anything that they benefit from the detachment. The Harpy and Hive Crone, I honestly didn't even check if they have the Vanguard, and I'm still not going to go check because even with the Vanguard keyword, which I assume they have that they have wings, they don't gain enough benefit to really be viable. The Harridan does not gain that Vanguard keyword even though he has the wings, so being 600 points, he is just a bit overpriced in this detachment. The Neurotyrant, I think I put him a little bit low here. He's good in any list, really. This detachment doesn't give him anything specifically good, but he's just nice to have the -1 to battle shocks. The Venomthropes, really not a huge benefit in this detachment. You are going to hopefully be getting into melee ASAP, and they cannot advance and charge themselves, and once you are in melee, that stealth that they're giving out is no longer useful. The Zoanthropes, probably should have put them a little bit higher. They have no benefit from this detachment, but they do have one of the few profiles that can reliably pull off something bigger from the board, so maybe pull off something with a Flamer profile so you can safely charge forward with your Vanguard units. In D tier, the Tyrant Guard, really no utility as the Winged Hive Tyrant is the best one and they can't be added to his group. The Biohierophant overpriced, the Hive Guard overpriced. The Malik Neurogant Screamer Killer, really no utility gain from the detachment. Screamer Killer, Swarmlord, Turvagon, Toxicrine, all very, very overpriced. The Trigon, again, really no utility in this detachment, and same goes for the Tyrannifex, who is also overpriced. And everyone's favorite list, the Vanguard Onslaught. I actually have been a little bit cool on this list compared to how everyone else is. I know Advance and Charge is so strong and there's so many units with the Vanguard keyword. I just don't necessarily think it's going to be as overpowered as much as it is just fun to play to get away from that standard style that's sort of been very shooting meta in 10th edition, to have an army with enough interesting things in its detachment to hopefully make a melee based kind of flying cheeky army work. So looking at the list here, Death Leaper, he is the Warlord because you can do that with the Vanguard Onslaught. I think it'd be pretty easy to keep him alive if you so needed to. The Broodlord here has Neuronode, which is going to give you the redeploy, and then he is coming with a squad of 10 Gene Stealers. Then the Winged Hive Tyrant, that's whenever you bring in things off reserves. I think 2 up that has to be battle shocked. Basically need to put it on something that's going to be alive for the whole round, and the goal would be to target him with the stratagem for lone operative anytime he's in relative danger. The Winged Tyranid Primes here, they are super strong in this list. They give the Vanguard keyword to the Warriors, which are going to be very, very important to have that squad in there. The ability to advance, charge, and the shooting squad can advance, charge, and then fall back and charge. So getting them into combat much easier is going to be obviously just beneficial for them. The Gargoyle squads, 2 sets of 20 here. This is a bit of the meme I leaned into. So this is 150 points over what it needs to be, the normal 10 and 10. It does come with a small benefit that if you get turn 1, and you are not against an opponent that has scout movement or an infiltrator, or maybe just 1 scout movement that he does not use properly, you can pretty much automatically win the game. So on turn 1, you take your 20 gargoyles, spread them out 9 inches away, shoot and scoot, and you've blocked your entire opponent's movement phase down to just 3 inches. And they have to move and then shoot the gargoyles, really 2 inches because you can't get within 1 inch engagement range. So some stuff is going to be able to move past that, but you're going to be able to block out the majority of the army, and then you can do it again the next turn. And that's turn 1 deployment because of Vanguard. So you can do this right away before they moved anything, zone them out, and then do it again in turn 2. And basically any army that is having to play at 150 point advantage to me, because these would normally only be 2 squads of 10, but they in turn don't get to move in their first 2 turns, or at least not move towards objectives, I have so much I can do around that. Of course, won't roll first turn, and then you'll have to deal with that. The infantry here, we have 3 squads of Gene Stealers, 1 at the 10 squad that's going to be traveling with the Broodlord, and then 2 5-man squads. I really wanted to get a bunch of these 10-man Gene Stealer squads out there and roll them down the middle. I haven't seen people too hot on it. I don't know why. I think they're good. They're very strong at taking out infantry. They don't have as many devastating as before with the changes. So I went with just the 2 squads of 5. They still have the -2 AP, so it's going to feel against some infantry units. It's going to feel like devastating wounds. And then the squad of 10 with the Broodlord can sort of be the main threat if we have something bigger that can be advanced and charged on the first turn. And these guys are going to just be all going out, scoring points, hiding, and trying to just find ways that they can get into melee. The Neurolictors, 2 of those, they're very strong in the squad. They have the Vanguard keyword, and then just in general having the ability to cause battle shocks and protect the points like that. They're just a very strong unit. Pyrovores, 1 squad of 3. I saw this and stole it immediately from Art of War 40k. I thought about it. Why do they have 3 Pyrovores? You don't need 3. Of course you do need 3, because on turn 2, 1 turn ahead of time, as per the rules of the Vanguard, you can bring in 2 Vanguards or 1 normal Tyranid unit a turn early. So you have a squad of 3 Pyrovores that will basically tell your opponent that if you leave a gap in your back line where any infantry are, they are going to wipe that squad. And just being able to do it a turn early, it's just a lot of availability there. Then the Tyranid Warriors, these guys are going to benefit big time for the Vanguard detachment gaining and being able to advance and charge. Their goal, obviously, there, just getting these guys into melee as fast as possible, running them down the line with the rest of these guys going down the line, and you just have a lot of mid-ranged units with high damage potential that are going to be in melee very soon. And your opponent has to choose which ones they're going to rip off the board. So 3 squads of Von Ryan's Leapers at 3 each. With the melee squads, I don't see much use other than stratagems for grouping them into larger ones. These Tyranid Warrior squads we're grouping with the Winged Tyranid Prime, so obviously giving them the full 6 for all the benefits is very useful. But for the Von Ryan's Leapers, I didn't think that 3 squads of 6 or even having 1 more than 9 would be that necessary. It's nice to have the 3 squads of 3. I think this is a good quality way to get into engagement with some of them and force your opponent to have to shoot off 3 smaller squads rather than 1 larger one. And then 2 Ripper Swarms for scoring points, of course. I forgot my Biovore. So this squad is about 40 points over with the Biovore. We're probably going to have to trim off maybe one of the Von Ryan's Leaper squads. Maybe drop the Pyrovores down to 2 and trim off one of the Rippers. You have to play around with it, but so forgot the Biovore here. So this is basically the idea here. Gotta add the Biovore, but the goal is to play a little bit cheeky, a little bit stealthy, but getting these melee units into melee as fast as possible or in one big turn with an advance and charge roll. I'm gonna have to play it a little bit more to really feel how much in a shooting meta that having an army that can easily get into melee feels. Whew. Okay, that's everything. I appreciate those of you that were able to stick it out, and anyone just for taking the time to check out a small channel like this. I know you will have some opinions, so feel free to let them rip in the comments section. Please like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k strategies.